one thing that I don't hear talked about a lot is there's this construct of private prisons being bad and public prisons being good. And one of the things that's interesting from an inmate's perspective is, so I was at one private prison and two public prisons. I don't know if public prison is what you would call it, but a state prison or whatever. So I was at Benton County, and then I was at 4 Mile, and then I was at Skyline. And by far, like, Skyline and 4 Mile were like much more negative experiences for me than Bent was. And that's because Skyline and 4 Mile had a whole different like program paradigm than Bent County did. So Bent County had, the main difference for me was Bent County had a band program, it had a computer program, so like it had 2 different computer classes that were offered.
And that was the private one?
Exactly, yeah. So, and then the private one, they had, so the guards were a kind of different caliber person than the state prison. And in some ways they were better, in some ways they were worse. So like, well, let me just keep going. And then they also can't take away earn time from you. They can only like suspend privileges from you. So you might do like, if you get in trouble, you might do 30 days in the hole or whatever, I don't know. I never went to the hole, but, or like they might, have you wear orange pants, and that kind of signals to everybody that you've got suspended privileges or whatever. And so guards will know not to let you, if they see you, watching a TV or something you're not supposed to. I don't know. Like they'll take away your property from you while you're in oranges, and then you get it back when you're done. So, yeah, the main differences for me was, so there were these 2 computer classes. There was like an intro to computer class, which I was helping them run. I was teaching I was teaching like basic, Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, stuff like that. I was teaching that to inmates that had never used computers before. And one of the perks of doing that job was you got to sit at a computer, and I used that time to do like self-paced study. So and then the other class was kind of a more advanced version of the same thing, where people who had a slightly better understanding of, that stuff could take like a more advanced version of it all. And then I also learned HTML and CSS and a little bit of basic scripting. And then when I started helping teach the beginner class, I was like using the interlibrary loan program to like expand my knowledge on that. So I got kind of like a more advanced understanding of web design from what, and before prison I didn't know anything about how to design a website. And then they also had like basic like Photoshop. They didn't have Photoshop. They had like a freeware version of like kind of like a cheap knockoff of Photoshop. And so me and the other guy that were, he was actually my cellmate. We both had the same job, and we were both like kind of like nerds, and so we would both self-paced learn web programming. He's now doing that on the streets. He's like he had a programming degree from like the 90s, so he was ahead of me as far as that went, but he was also behind in terms of like, I don't know exactly, like he just didn't know all the up-to-date web stuff.
Whereas what were the public prisons like?
Yeah, so the public prison was much more like, well, so the main thing that shocked me was that was where all like the slave jobs were. They didn't really have all-day grinding jobs at the private prison. And it seemed to me that the state prison was just as exploitative, if not more so, than as the private prison, because they basically farmed out their inmate population to all these like companies that were somehow affiliated with CCI, which is Colorado Correctional Industries. And so they farmed out the labor to companies affiliated with CCI, and inmates might work like 10-hour days, 12-hour days. And I mean, they paid you more than 60 cents a day for those jobs, but you might start off earning $100 a month, $100 a month, and then if you worked your way up to like the most senior position, you might be earning like $300 a month, which is pretty rare. You'd have to be at one of those places for at least a couple years, working the same job, and there's a lot of like conflict in those jobs where people will kind of like lie and accuse because everyone's kind of jealous to get more money.
Was there a penalty for not working?
Yeah, if you didn't work, or if you showed up late, or if you missed a shift or whatever, you were basically punished for, you were put on restricted privileges. You wore orange pants. You had to perform like menial labor, like pulling weeds and basic stuff like that. You weren't allowed to leave your cell except to eat and work. And you were given kind of like a half-hour rec period in the morning to like walk the track before everyone else was let out. That was at 4 Mile. At Skyline, I don't remember. That people didn't get in trouble as much at Skyline. And then they also had like loudspeakers in every room, and like all the announcements for the entire prison were like blasted into every room 24/7. So like it was pretty crazy. Yeah. I actually have hearing loss from a lot of the noise in prison. I mean, it's hard to say what was louder, the medium or the minimums, because the medium was kind of like being in the pod was kind of like, if you've ever been in a public like swimming pool that's like wide open, and you just hear all of that like reverbing sort of vocal noise and shouting and just like, it was kind of like living in an environment like that with 100 people. But anyway, so yeah, I get the argument that private prisons incentivize incarceration, and I definitely don't like the incentives that increase incarceration. But I felt that the conditions were somewhat more humane at the private that I was at than at the state prison. And also the guards were way more petty at the state prisons. They seemed to have more of a like militaristic kind of vibe, and they were, I don't know, just a totally different vibe. The private prison, the guards were almost kind of like doughy and lazy and sort of underpaid and kind of like a Walmart employee almost. Whereas, at the state prison, they were more like
mall guard.
Yeah. No, not even mall guard. Like, maybe mall guard. I don't know, but definitely like not. They weren't like cops. In prison, in the state prisons, they were more like cops, and the older ones especially had like these really strange attitudes, or like really weird rules. Like, they had this old guy that everyone hated. I don't remember his name, but he was like obsessed with shoelaces. He would like look at your shoelaces, and he would like literally stare at everyone's shoelaces. Or like they had these weird rules. Every prison has these weird different rules from other prisons. So like at the state one, you like couldn't wear a sweatshirt under your prison greens, but you could wear like this thermal shirt. Whereas at the private, no one gave a shit what you wore, basically. And then I guess I kind of like, I had bad luck going to 4 Mile and like the Canyon City complex, basically. Apparently those are like the shittiest minimums. Like they run the minimums kind of like mediums over there. So I never got to experience like the minimum, like, cause everyone was always talking to me about like, oh, once you get to Arrowhead or yada yada, it's great. You get to hang out until midnight and like play guitar all day, and like you can check out a guitar all night or whatever the fuck, I don't know. You can wear your like sweatshirt. You can wear whatever you want to go eat and like blah blah blah. But it seems like they all have like these weird jobs. So like my personal philosophy with the jobs is like, I would say that if you incarcerate someone, you're responsible for them. Making someone work to pay their own way, I would say that's fine if you can convince them to do it. Like, I think it should be voluntary. So I think, so like like prison's not expensive. Like it costs a lot to house an inmate. I don't know what the costs are. Like maybe they finance building the prison and then the guards' salaries, but like a prison cell is very small, and you wouldn't pay like thousands of dollars a month to live in a cell that small. Like there's no way. I don't know, it seems to me like if you work, you get a single cell. That would be something, that would be like a nice perk. Or like working for, if they don't want to pay you money, working for like days off the end of your sentence. Like to some extent they do that already, but it's 10 days off the end of your sentence for every month that you perform your job well. And yeah, I don't know, it doesn't feel like a lot when you're in prison. Maybe you work a day and you get a day off. That would seem more fair to me. Maybe lots of people would probably work every day just to get, you know, every day off that they can. But also, like, I don't see why inmates can't be paid more than like $100 a month or $300 a month or 60 cents a day, depending on the job.
It really makes you wonder where that extra money goes.
Kinda, yeah. I know that so at 4 Mile they have this like cow sort of milking program, and some of the guys that work there, like the inmates have like these really, a lot of the workers have like a real antipathy towards like the job that they're working. And yeah, I don't think it's healthy for the psychology, you know. Like I remember at anyway, so at this dairy farm, the people that run it are just like, they're not guards, they're kind of like employees of the dairy, and they're employees of CCI, which is kind of its own thing. Or maybe they're guards too, but they don't work for the same union or something, I don't really know. But one of my cellmates was saying that these guys showed him that they're being paid like pretty high wages, and then the state is keeping most of it to offset the cost of incarceration, and then paying them. So like the CCI, whatever industry is paying for the inmate labor, is actually paying like 17 or, oh, is that my chair? I wonder what that was. Yeah, they're paying like $17, $18 an hour for the inmate labor, and then the inmate gets like a couple $100 from that. I think. I don't know what the actual prices are. The other thing that's weird is that none of the jobs have corresponding industries that the inmates can work at when they get out. You know, that ostensibly they're being taught skills, but they're just being taught like how to do like these jobs that, like, most guys are from the city. They're not going to go back to Denver or back to Greeley or whatever and then milk cows, you know, like,
or tame horses.
Or tame horses, yeah. Yeah, there's not cities that these guys can parole to that have those jobs lined up and waiting for them either.
It's like they're good enough to work in prison for those companies, but those companies won't hire them afterwards.
Right. I don't think they're allowed to.
And wouldn't that be a great incentive though?
I don't know.
Or not so much?
I don't know. I think that a lot of inmates would voluntarily work, and I think it's the choice that matters, you know. Like, it's kind of like consent, you know. Like, you don't want to be teaching people who already have trouble with following the law that power is what matters and not like choice. I think that's kind of interesting. Anyway.
What exactly do you mean by the consent aspect of it?
Well, so like, I think most crimes transgress against another person's desire for that crime not to happen, you know? Like theft, you're transgressing against someone's desire not to have their stuff taken away from them. And obviously there's like, it's just every crime is a violation of another person's will. And for the justice system to enact a sort of societal revenge where there's no choice on the inmate's part, there's no like positive example of choice. It's all just, you know, they're running it, you have to do it because they have the power, they'll punish you if you don't do it, and that's a very, I don't know, I mean, it reinforces ideas about people with the power get to run things, as opposed to people are empowered to do what they want to do. And a lot of inmates don't know what it's like to be empowered. They just know what it's like to either like be dominated or dominate someone else. And it's like a cycle of trauma that they can't get out of.